I was just going through some Mighty Number 9 reviews. I'll tell you something. This game got shit on like an anime fan on prom night.
I almost backed this game on Kickstarter, but by the time I had the money, the deadline was up. But at least the game was fully funded and then some, raising about $4 million and hitting the stretch goals and becoming a very successful, albeit complex, campaign. Keiji Inafune, the man that's often credited for creating Mega Man, although he'll tell you otherwise, as he's mostly a character designer, not landing producer credits until 1996 with Mega Man 8. He left Capcom for a multitude of reasons and founded his own studio called Concept. Wanting to make a Mega Man game but unable to use the character as Capcom owns the intellectual property, he got to work on Mighty Number 9, a spiritual successor to Mega Man, featuring a robot boy that looks like Mega Man because it's Inafune's style. I'm not really surprised at the similarities. In fact, the human characters look very much like they were pulled from the Astro Boy series. Again, not surprising considering that Inafune was influenced by the Astro Boy series for his Mega Man designs. The game was delayed several times and anticipation was pretty high. Everyone wanted to see a new Mega Man styled game, but people started to doubt what was going on. Some even tossing their proverbial cookies because of a self-proclaimed feminist joining the team as a community manager. Only because she knew someone that worked at Concept, and everyone was afraid that she, a glorified message board moderator, was going to force the game's designer to make Beck into a girl. Yes, people actually worried about a robot's gender being changed, and it's as stupid as it sounds. But most of the time, people were citing mismanagement on Concept's part due to them trying to start a Mega Man Legend successor called Red Ash, before Mighty Number 9 was even out. People really lost their patience when the game was delayed because of a multiplayer option that no one asked for, was giving the development team troubles even though the main solo game was 100% ready to go. And there's still problems with the multiplayer. Then when the game finally came out, they screwed it up by sending out broken download codes that didn't work, codes for platforms people didn't ask for, and at time of writing, June 26, YouTuber Alpha Omega Sin still hasn't gotten his copy of the game that he backed, and was even considering pirating it, and he actually did. And the game has gotten mixed reception, and a lot of people calling it a bad game and a failed attempt at a Mega Man game.
But is this game really as bad as everyone says that it is? Or does everyone just have their nostalgia goggles set to blind? And if I'm asking that question, you already know what the answer is.
Graphically, the game is not the best. It looks like something we'd see on the PlayStation 2, and that's not an exaggeration. Saying that it looks like a PlayStation 1 game is an exaggeration, however. For a game released in 2016, the polygon count is surprisingly, shockingly low. The hands on the models look chunky, and not due to an artistic design, but because of sloppy modeling. Almost amateur looking. The faces are either painted onto the geometry of the heads or just floating above it. It's hard to tell, because the marks under Beck's eyes are floating on his face, but I'm not sure about his eyes or mouth. It's a PlayStation 1 technique that was used to save on polygon count so the PS1 hardware wouldn't be burdened with too much rendering. Remember how Lara Croft's face was just painted onto her head? That's what it looks like. And that's what they did here. But this isn't the PlayStation 1. This is running on modern hardware. This would be considered unacceptable for PS2 standards, as games like the Jack and Ratchet series proved that they could animate and render very expressive cartoon faces. The textures on the models are flat, because they aren't even modeled for detail. They didn't even do any bump mapping to give the illusion of model geometry. It just looks graphically dated, and not in a good way. Not like other indie titles that make their games look like they were from previous generations. Games like Kingdom Hearts, Jack, the PS2 Ratchet games have graphics that still hold up today. Mighty Number 9 doesn't. It looks like they were rushing it through the modeling process. I don't mind the animation, it looks pretty good for a 2D with 3D graphics platformer should. The sound design is alright. I like and enjoy the music. It's something that should come from a game that's trying to be in the same vein as a Mega Man game. The voice acting is bad though. Not because of the voice actors. The voices actually fit the characters pretty well, but the lines they have to deliver are ball-retractingly annoying. It's nowhere near as bad as Mega Man X7's acting and dialogue, but for example, Mighty Number 2 Cryosphere says something along the lines of, "Aw, did that hurt? Want me to put some ice on it?" After that line was said, I went, ugh, really? What's next? Ice to see you, chill out, cool party, allow me to break the ice, that's the chilling sound of your doom, gonna put you on ice, talk about the cold shoulder. I can go on and on here. I've seen that Batman and Robin movie more times than I should have and care to admit, and I know a lot of those ice puns. There's another character named Call, this game's version of Roll, but she acts more like Alia from the X series. She has absolutely no personality, being the most robotic of the robots. But sound and graphics aren't everything, which is something that this game should be grateful for. Beck can run, jump, and shoot. Instead of Mega Man's slide, he has X's dash. When you come to face enemies, you shoot them until they're stunned and have a colored cube swirling around them. Then you dash into them, absorb them, and most of the time it's for combo points. But you can get temporary power-ups, like increased damage, defense, or speed. This aspect is criticized, but you don't actually need to use it on regular enemies as they'll be destroyed with enough shots, just like any regular Mega Man game out there. You do have to use the dash on the bosses though, otherwise they're gonna heal. Beck's dash is probably his most useful ability as it can be used in rapid succession, unlike Mega Man X where you have to wait for the dash to finish before you can use it again. I see nothing wrong with the dash ability because it's fun to use, and there are certain times where it's needed during the stages, much like the slide in the original Mega Man games. The level design is pretty good. It's very Mega Man-like, and it's something that I would expect from a game that's supposed to be a spiritual successor to a Mega Man franchise. The game is also rather difficult at first, which I saw a lot of people criticize for, and I'm sitting here thinking, have you not played the original NES Mega Man games? Do you not remember how hard those games were? If you grew up with them and played them a lot, then of course you're going to be good at them. But do you remember how hard those NES Mega Man games were when you first played them? You had to memorize the stage layout and remember where the hazards were to avoid them. You had to memorize the boss patterns so that you wouldn't take damage. You needed to know how their weapons worked. That's how Mega Man games played. It was trial and error. You had no idea which Robot Master was easier to defeat with the Mega Buster, and you didn't know which one was weak to the other's weapon. But eventually, through memorization and experimentation, you figured it out.
So for everyone who's complaining about how Mighty Number 9 is such a hard game, it's too difficult, I got 2 words for you. Get good. You people out there jerk off to Dark Souls' difficulty, but yet a cartoony platform comes around and it's difficult, you shit your pants and cry about it.
This game is easier than a Mega Man game because once you defeat your first Mighty Number, which should be Mighty Number 1 Pyro, because he, like all the other bosses, painfully telegraphs its attacks. So when you figure out the timing and how the attacks work, you can easily avoid it. If there's no audio cue, there's a visual cue, like Pyro. The telegraphs for when he's going to charge at you or do a belly flop are different animations so you know when to avoid him. So that way he doesn't instantly kill you. People complain that about the halfway mark Dr. White interrupts you so that way you can't hear the audio cue. But there is a visual cue to aid you. Dinah moves slow and her attacks are easy enough to shake off as it takes forever for her to attack. I thought that all you had to do was go down the line because Cryosphere is weak to Pyrogen. But that's not the case. The order in which you should go is Pyrogen, Cryosphere, Battalion, Seismic, Brandish, Dynatron, Countershade, and Aviator. And you'll see this because you'll get advice from the Mighty Number whose weapon is powerful against the boss you'll be facing in the level select screen. As you progress and defeat the Mighty Numbers and help them regain their senses, they'll actually come in and help you during certain sections of the stages. The powers that you get from the Mighty Numbers have gotten complaints about being useless and how you don't need to use them except during boss sections. And that's different from any other Mega Man game. How? It wasn't until the X series, I think, I could be wrong, where the weapons obtained from bosses had more utility use instead of just being something to attack with. And if you start dying a lot, the game takes pity on you by giving you power-ups at the checkpoints when you respawn. Also, word of advice. Crank that extra life counter all the way to 9 in the options, because it'll be easier for you to learn the mechanics of the fights. I will say that switching between weapons isn't that smooth of a process. Instead of just changing weapons, you need to select them through a tray, and then use a button to confirm the selection. You can hold up to 2 energy tanks, and you have to use them because you can't save them. So if you die, no more energy tank, and you'll have to hope that you can pick up another one later. There isn't that much enemy variation in the game. In fact, you'll be running into the same enemies a lot. There's 3 that I can think of off the top of my head that I saw quite often. One was a trash can, a buzz bomber looking thing, and a turret with a shield. That's supposed to be like the Sniper Joe of the series. There's very few level-specific enemies, and they don't respawn like they would in your typical Mega Man game. But I'm fine with that. How often do you go backwards in a Mega Man game anyway, other than to exploit the respawn for items that enemies may drop? Everyone's complaining that this isn't the Mega Man game they were expecting. But yet it is the Mega Man game they were expecting. Mighty Number 9 embodies everything that made Mega Man games so good. I've seen more complaints about Mighty Number 9 not being a Mega Man successor, but not a single person giving a reason as to why. It's the equivalent of every Sonic fan bitching about how each new Sonic game isn't a Sonic game. What's your fucking prerequisite then? The guy that reviewed Mighty Number 9 for Game Informer said that it didn't have the heart of the classic games. That is one thing I hate. When someone says that a game doesn't have the heart of its predecessor, or the formula was changed, or something of that nature. Really vague wording that no one explains, but that is just an excuse they roll with. Because the guy actually complimented the game more than he criticized. Some criticism making absolutely no sense. Like how some stages were by the number. Again, a vague statement. Because if the game is emulating Mega Man and the stage design is by the number, isn't that a good thing? He said that Concept appreciated the Mega Man games and that it shows during every second of gameplay, only to say that's where they went wrong, but also said that he'd rather play the classic Mega Man games. His review is akin to those hipster retards that criticize without an actual reason, being contradictory to their own logic every step of the way, biting into an apple and then complaining that it doesn't taste like an orange. Let's see, in a Mega Man game you jump about on platforms while you shoot at robots. In Mighty Number 9, you jump about on platforms and shoot at robots. Both games feature bosses that have patterns, telegraphs, and weaknesses. Both games have similar stories. So what's the tipping point? Is it because Beck's dash can be used to defeat enemies to score power-ups and bonuses? A lot of people complained about the dash being included. That's like complaining about Sonic having the boost ability, something that is largely optional, but helps. Is it because of the complicated development cycle? The lack of communication? Get over it! Games in development run into problems. It's natural and embarrassing for a game's creator to come out and say that they have to delay a game. A big company like EA or Ubisoft have screwed up so much that it's just another walk in the park. Or they ignore it and remain silent. At least Concept tried to communicate. And before you say that I'm fanboying or white knighting, please keep this fact in your mind. Because people are saying that Mighty Number 9 is a failure, is casting doubt on a lot of other Kickstarted games, like Bloodstained or Yooka-Laylee, and that is absurd. People are going to be saying that those games are bad because they too were funded by Kickstarter. It's insane that that's becoming the logic nowadays. A game was funded on Kickstarter, so it's going to be bad. Therefore, no one is going to even give it a chance. They hated it before they even bought it and will go in with that mindset for all Kickstarted games. It's like when they say a crazy kid shot up a school. Well, he played violent video games. But no, correlation is not causation. Men are sexist and women are being oppressed because of all these video games where the male protagonists are rescuing depowered women. Again, no, correlation doesn't equal causation. Oh, this game was funded on Kickstarter, and Kickstarter has had a lot of failed games, so this game must be bad. Yep, makes perfect sense to me. I swear to God, gamers can be their own worst enemies sometimes. And that's going to be a rant for another day. I think Mighty Number 9 proves why Capcom stopped making Mega Man games. There are games that people say they want, only to turn around and hate on it for illogical reasons. I understand that some versions, like the one for the Wii U, has had nothing but problems. But to criticize a game just because of a troubled development cycle that resulted in a lot of delays is stupid. People did the same with Duke Nukem Forever, and that game plays fine on the PC. But I do find it funny that because of this game, I'm seeing a lot of people bring up Dust and Elysian Tale, aka the best game ever made. People are finally giving Dust the recognition it deserves, 4 years later. But they keep bringing up how it was all made by one guy for a lot less, while Mighty Number 9 was made by a whole team for $4 million. Yeah, a guy living off of ramen noodles and making the game in his own house probably could make a really good game in 3.5 years. As opposed to a team of people that needed to be paid to work in an office building that's rented would need a bigger budget. The comparison of what one person can do with little money versus a team with a bigger budget is absolutely stupid. Dust was on the Xbox 360 first, then PC, then Mac, then Linux, then PS4, then iOS. They weren't all released at once. Unlike how Mighty Number 9 tried. Everyone had their nostalgic goggles on when it came to Mighty Number 9, and Keiji Inafune, who has a very large yet inflated by fans reputation. But you know what? He's only human, he makes mistakes, get over it. If you really want a fair comparison, compare Dust and Elysian Tale 2, and I can't believe I'm going to bring this up. But there's a game that I wrote a review for and never produced. A review that is probably my best work ever. Dust took 3.5 years to make and was made by one person, and is the best game ever made. The game in question that I'm talking about was made by one person, took them 5 years to make, and it's the second worst piece of shit I've ever played. So it doesn't matter how many people it took to make a game, or how much money went into it, or how much time it took. Shit happens during development. So no, Mighty Number 9 is not a bad game. It's a damn fine game. And if you like classic Mega Man games, then you should be playing it. I was expecting a Mega Man experience, playing as a robotic kid that jumps and shoots at other robots while going through levels designed with those two mechanics in mind, and fighting bosses with patterns and telegraphs. And you know what? I got everything that I was expecting.
Is Mighty Number 9 worth $20? Fuck no. $15 at the most is more than a fair price for it. It's a good game, so get your heads out of your asses and play the damn thing because it's what you've been asking for such a very long time.